Let's start.
and tyranny are popping bottles because Trump is taking over the DCPD and deploying the National Guard against the citizens of our capital. Classic them. To be fair, this sort of thing is never what they meant by tyranny. No. See, our government forgiving the student loan debt of a single working mother of three, that is the true face of tyranny. But turning the Capitol PD into your Praetorian Guard and using them to intimidate the citizens into submitting to your will, like there's ain't nothing tyrannical about that. That's just some good old-fashioned kick-ass lib-owning. That's all that is. Now, their basic stance on government action is, if it helps people, tyranny most foul. If it hurts people, put that shit on pay-per-view, baby. They love it. But so far, they still feel the need to rationalize this stuff in public. So the stated reason for this move is, you guessed it, crime stuff. Yes, in a very dramatic press conference, Trump said the city was overrun with violent thugs, bloodthirsty gangs, drug-addled maniacs, and worst of all, the homeless. Somebody faints in the back. It's ridiculous. And right now you're thinking, well, that sounds bad. How did I miss that? Here I thought DC's violent crime rate was at a 30-year low. In fact, the last time I remember seeing violence run amok in Washington was January 6, 2021, when a horde of sentient truck nuts overran the Capitol. Trump didn't deploy the Guard then. In fact, he pardoned those people. So for him to be doing this now, something very bad must have happened. And you're right, something terrible did happen. Something so heinous that January 6 pales in comparison. Yes, the unforgivable crime that precipitated this drastic action was big balls getting beat up by high schoolers. I know. Big balls. Not one of the Trump administration's foremost policymakers, big balls. The very same. And like I'm sure we would all agree that barely Mr. Balls is an unimpeachable character and integrity, but his story is really bad. It's made a lot of people wonder, is it some kind of false flag deal, wherein the Trump team uses an isolated, overblown incident as an excuse to expand their authoritarian vision. And I don't want to get too professorial or nothing, but my take on that is, oh, you mean to tell me these assholes would use a bunch of made-up boogeyman bullshit to do some fucked up stuff? Surely not. Right? And a lot of other people are saying, like, this is all just a distraction from the Epstein files. And to those people, I say, yes and no. Like, look, we totally should not just forget about the Epstein files, but that kind of feels like saying, oh, don't worry about this. That is what really matters. It's like, I mean, no, this matters too. Okay, so that guy's only setting your house on fire to distract from the fact that he abducted your mamaw. It's like, I'm still not over the mamaw thing, but a house fire is also a problem. Like, the Epstein files are still important, but like, this is more than just a distraction. I mean, this is them soft launching martial law. Like, you know, when Taco Bell devises a new delicious affront to God, they try it out first in some random, particularly fat Midwestern city before they roll it out nationwide. Well, this is Trump doing that, but with fucking dollar store 1984. So yeah, it's pretty important. That's all I'm saying. Okay, YouTube, listen, as with all things that these days, the way the media is talking about this is maddening, depending on where in the media you look at. Anyway, no offense to the ones I haven't graced with my presence yet, but I'm sure I'll get there someday. But I'm also from a very rural redneck town, so I'm used to this. I have a lifelong perspective on this whole thing, because like my main mom, who was one of the sweetest people on earth, when I first moved out here to like one of the nicer, more suburban parts of the Los Angeles area, I'd call Mima on the phone and tell her I was going to the grocery store, and she'd be like, oh, don't get stabbed in the parking lot, right? And it's like, I live in Elysium. It's totally fine. But the picture that people have of these cities is truly mind-boggling if you ever spend any amount of time with them in the cities. I know that back home people are like, you know, some people are like, where's Trey at this weekend? San Francisco. They just picture me out there like wading through dildos and used heroin needles and stuff, and then you smash cut to me like enjoying a croissant at a bistro or something like that. It's just delightful, right? You tell them, even though it's also in Tennessee, you tell them, oh, he's in Memphis this week, and they're like, oh, they just picture me being forced to play horse at gunpoint. You know, cut to me eating ribs, listening to the blues, everything's cool. You tell them I'm in Portland, they're like, oh, you know, they're forcing him to climb into the middle of the naked hippie pile as we speak. Cut to me in Portland, climbing into the middle of the naked hippie pile. I'm kidding. I wouldn't do that. I'm a happily married man, but I appreciate that Portland's propensity for doing naked hippie stuff. I'm saying that one is not unfair, but a lot of the rest of them are, you know, ridiculous. Again, if you've been there, DC is one of my favorite cities in this country. I've been there countless times. Some of my favorite restaurants, one of my favorite comedy clubs, just some of my favorite times and people are all in DC. Never one time in all the years I've been going there have I ever had any kind of incident, and I mean any kind. Nothing. I haven't seen anything, I haven't experienced anything, and I've spent quite a bit of time there at this point, so I just kind of scoff at these stories when they come up. But they'll use any excuse they can to get their authoritarian bullshit across. I mean, before long, at this point, we're almost lucky that they're still making excuses. They're not going to be bothering for too much longer, I'm pretty sure. I read on the internet, Reddit comment, so you know it's true. Now, we all know about Project 2025, and it was a whole thing, and Trump said, I don't even know what that is, and some people are like, he seems like a good guy. I think Kamala's weird. I trust him on that. Guess what, asshole? We're apparently halfway through Project 2025 as listed on their, you know, in their manifesto they got. Halfway through it already in 6 months of the first term. Gotta give it up to them. They've been working hard at tearing shit down. But here's what's really scary, according to this random commenter who I took as the gospel on Reddit. A lot of people think that the part about Project 2025 that we are aware of is just the first of 3 parts, and that part 2 and part 3 are not even publicized and are far worse. You're like, what the fuck? Should I just get a GIMP mask now? How the fuck could it be that much worse? But that's what they say. So, you know, that's what I like to do at the very end of these videos. Just bum everybody out really more, hopefully induce an existential crisis in all my followers and YouTube fans. But, you know, I had to deal with it, and so do you. But either way, that'll do for now. It'll be, you know, it'll be all right. We'll just it'll be all right. Thank you guys for being there. I appreciate it. Put these thing up here, you know, good distraction. Watch this. That's Trash Daddy, my most recent comedy special. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. You get all these videos, stand-up videos, cooking videos, podcasts, other stuff. And then all important, TreyCrowder.com. Check that out. It's got tour dates where I'm coming to do stand-up comedy. That's live and in person. That's what I really do. So check it out. If I'm coming near your city, consider getting a ticket. Come and see me. I think you'll enjoy it. People typically do. It's a good time. Either way, if you keep watching these, I'll keep pushing them out, I reckon. I love you like chicken. Hang in there, everybody. See you. Bye.
things about it than the city actually did. Having said that, there are many who are concerned about exactly how the president will and the attorney general will use their power to address issues like homelessness and where they will put people, and using the knowledge we have so far of how this administration has treated migrants. I'm sure there's many concerns among Democrats especially about how people will be treated when they are taken off the street. We'll see what happens. We will definitely see what happens, and we won't jump ahead of that. But I think this is a political win for the president. Anybody who takes a look at what is happening in Washington, even the mayor herself will say, you know, they cannot do certain things to take people off the street because of court rulings. And there are people on the street, often near monuments and coffee shops and near Capitol Hill. You can walk out there on a weekend morning and you will find that happening. So I think one of the things that is a real struggle here politically is how Democrats deal with the reality in Washington versus clearly the triggering attempt that the president is having on this situation that is politically a winner for him, really, but not necessarily what might solve the problem truly when we're dealing with people who are struggling and who are out there and who become dangerous in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, like any American city, there's crime, there's a problem with homelessness. We just read some of those stats. D.C. is unique in that it's our nation's capital. Anthony, it may be a short-term political winner. We'll see if he likes how this goes. If he does decide to expand this concept to Chicago and to L.A. and to other cities he's going to use it, we'll see if it's true that there's a perception and a feeling among people, some people who live in Washington, that the crime is worse. Data tells us otherwise, so it's walking that line of addressing statistics and not, as we said yesterday, making decisions based on anecdote because you heard a story about something happening.
Right, there is a gap between what the data shows and how many Washingtonians feel. And I live in Washington. This is personal for me. Many people are frustrated with crime that we see, particularly committed by juveniles in the city of Washington. People are frustrated, Willie, that when they go to CVS to buy deodorant, that they have to get it from behind locked plexiglass, right? But the response here, and you know, let me say this, right? These are not just random anecdotes. What we see in Washington Post polling, among others, is that roughly half of DC residents, mostly half of DC residents, view this as a serious problem or an extremely serious problem. And the question then becomes why, right? What I talked about with Caddy K a little earlier, and way too early, is that juvenile arrests are down in the District of Columbia. But we don't see that in Baltimore, where year over year juvenile arrests are up. And so what are the reasons for that? Jonathan Lemire rightly pointed out the $1 billion that Congress is withholding, which would allow Washington, D.C. to hire more officers. But the D.C. Council has a role to play here as well, because some of the laws passed are not as strong as they could be for juvenile offenders and for reoffenders. Now, having said all of that, I want to be clear that does not justify the disproportionate response that we are seeing from Donald Trump. It is a political stunt. He is exploiting people's fears. But to be frank, Democrats on the D.C. Council have created this political opening that allows him to do that. Now, I'm not naive, Willie. I suspect that even if juvenile crime wasn't a problem, Donald Trump would have taken the actions that we have seen in recent days. But from a raw political perspective, you never want to give your political opponent an opening to address the needs that many of your constituents have. And that's what we're seeing playing out right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. President Trump also is attempting to force the Smithsonian to change its museums, exhibits, and operations to reflect his view of American history. NBC News has learned the White House sent a letter to museum officials directing a wide review of 8 of the Smithsonian's 21 museums ahead of America's 250th anniversary. Vice President J.D. Vance will oversee that process. The museums will have 30 days to turn over information about their current exhibits and plans to commemorate the anniversary. And within 120 days, the White House says the Smithsonian must replace, quote, divisive or ideologically driven language with unifying, historically accurate, and constructive descriptions. The Wall Street Journal, which first reported the story, writes that the goal is to, quote, ensure the museums align with President Trump's interpretation of American history. It follows an executive order issued back in March in which the president criticized the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture for supposedly promoting race-centered ideology. NBC News then reported more than 30 artifacts were removed from the museum, including Harriet Tubman's hymn book and Frederick Douglass's memoir. This latest letter comes just days after the Smithsonian changed its text on a description of President Trump's impeachment following the January 6th Capitol riot. The new wording has no references to Trump's statement challenging the 2020 election results as being false. Whoa, there's a lot here. I would love to get your take on this, but it seems to me that this kind of feeds into the basic facts that Americans can agree on or not, and also erasing history, which seems incredibly dangerous in many ways in the long run.
So clearly President Trump and his team spent 4 years out of office examining every kind of aspect of American government to see where they could maximize their political leverage, whether it was at universities or at law firms and now at the Smithsonian museums, to see if they could bring those museums more in line with the will of the president. I think the fact that it even says in that order that this is to put history in line with the president, with President Trump's interpretation of history. I mean, it'd be fascinating to sit down with the president and ask him for an hour as a scholar, what is your interpretation of American history? Where do you see issues like the Civil War? What is your interpretation of issues like slavery? And I think it's no coincidence that it is the Museum of African American History, which is such a well-visited museum here in Washington, Mika. It's one of the most popular museums for people to go to. Anyone who hasn't been to it, I recommend that you come to it when you come to the city. It is very safe to visit the Museum of African American History, and it is incredibly moving and gut-wrenching experience. It's hard to see how you could have the exhibition that tells the story of slavery in America in a way that is unifying, and I can't remember quite what the other word was, unifying and uncontroversial or something. I mean, it's not. I mean, the question of slavery is not necessarily a unifying story. It's a hard, difficult, divisive story for America to tell, and I think the African American Museum does it very well. But if it starts having to tell a sanitized version of that story, it's no longer really a museum at that point. I mean, it's not a historical representation full of people. Serious research and scholarship.
Coming up, Russian forces may have punched a hole through Ukraine's front lines, giving Vladimir Putin a potential boost ahead of his meeting with President Trump. We'll have the latest on the high-stakes summit set for this Friday in Alaska. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Booking.com has all kinds of stays because some want a house in the desert. Others do not. Find exactly what you're looking for. Booking.com, booking.yeah.
How's it going, Angela? AT&T's internet works in minutes. So easy a baby can do it.
today. Plus, we'll beat any competitor's offer, guaranteed. And our price includes everything: installed flooring and even furniture. Get Empire's home floor advantage and save up to 50% off. Visit EmpireToday.com or give us a call to schedule your free estimate. You know the number.
President Trump and Vice President Vance are set to join a call with European leaders and Ukrainian President Zelensky today, where they will discuss the president's meeting set for Friday with Vladimir Putin. We know now that the venue for that meeting will be a U.S. Air Force base in the city of Anchorage, one day after Trump again floated the idea that Russia and Ukraine will end up swapping land. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt seemed to lower the stakes yesterday.
This is a listening exercise from the president. Look, only one party that's involved in this war is going to be present. And so this is for the president to go and to get, again, a more firm and better understanding of how we can.
Friday summer, we're getting reports that Russia has breached Ukraine's front line in the Donetsk region. Analysts say the Kremlin has advanced units and then pushed farther into Ukrainian-held territory, making small but significant gains. According to one think tank, the severity of the situation was made clear by Ukraine's hasty deployment of some of its most experienced troops to the battlefield. Meanwhile, Russia continues to attack civilian centers. More than 20 people were hurt on Sunday when Russia fired guided aerial bombs at a bus station in southeastern Ukraine. So a couple of days ahead of this meeting, Jonathan Lemire, Vladimir Putin does not appear to be a man ready for peace, or perhaps trying to increase his leverage in these conversations. The White House describing this as a feel-out meeting, trying to lower the bar a little bit, not expect some grand peace deal to come out of the summit at an air base there in Alaska. So what are the concerns? I know you have some new reporting this morning about what Vladimir Putin may gain from this meeting.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern in Ukraine and throughout Europe as to what's going to happen on Friday. Officials there actually somewhat encouraged the way the White House has lowered the stakes in the last 24 hours about this meeting, suggesting it'd be more of a listening exercise rather than a deal being struck, although who knows what will happen when Trump and Putin are potentially alone in a room together, just they and their interpreters. We've seen that before because President Trump is eager to get this war concluded. Vladimir Putin seems less so, and his nods to diplomacy, Putin's nods to diplomacy to this point, mostly seem an exercise in buying time, because so far this summer offensive has been rather ineffective until perhaps now these last 24 hours or so, some breakthroughs for Russian troops that may not make Putin motivated to make a deal. But there is a sense here, and a number of people I've talked to, the White House of course pushes that Trump will be tough with Putin, but there's a fear in Europe that Putin's going to offer a deal. He's going to say, look, I'll stop fighting, but I get to keep everything that I have, the land that I've conquered, and Ukraine can't have any security guarantees that would ward off Moscow from trying again down the road. If that's the case, Putin offers him the deal. The fear is that Trump would take that deal to Ukraine and say, this is it. But Zelensky, of course, can't accept that. And if that's the case, Ukraine may draw Trump's ire again. That's a real concern. And Gasson has a new column in New York Times with the headline, Trump is giving Putin a most wonderful gift. It reads in part this: as much as Putin loves wealth, he has shown that he loves power even more. Eternal power in his own country, which he wins by expanding Russia's borders, and power in the world at large, which he wins by making other leaders fear him. Trump seems to be unaware that by meeting with Putin, he's giving Putin exactly what the Russian leader wants, a demonstration of his power. Trump is giving Putin additional gifts by agreeing to meet him without Zelensky and by sidelining the European Union. Trump is affirming for all of Russia to see what Putin has claimed all along, that the conflict is really between Russia and the United States. The moment Putin walks into the negotiating room, he has gotten everything he wants, plus an opportunity to make a quip about Alaska as historically Russian land. Consider this a prediction. If the meeting does not produce an agreement, Putin loses nothing. Trump, on the other hand, would lose face if he walked out empty-handed. He may be motivated to accept something, anything. So That column there lines up, Caddy, with a lot of the reporting I've done, the fears that Europeans have. They're trying to manage Trump, though, ahead of this summit. He's going to be part of a virtual call today with European leaders. Zelensky also on that call. And we should note, Zelensky's learned some lessons from that Oval Office dust-up in February where Trump advanced sort of berated him for the world to see. He's playing nice here. He's clearly disappointed that he's not part of this meeting. At least to this point, though, he's not criticizing Trump by name. He's simply saying we're worried the Russians could try to deceive the Americans. That's a fear that the continent seems to have entirely.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to senior European officials in the last couple of days who have pointed out to me that there is a long history of the United States kind of trying to negotiate European security issues over the heads of Europeans, and they see this in that vein as well. I think the concern is that the perception in the White House is that this is all about territory, and if you can just fix the territorial side in a kind of neat deal, then you fix the Ukraine issue. Whereas, of course, for the Europeans, what they are keen to stress to the White House in that call is that this is not just about territory, it's as well about Ukrainian independence. And that means Ukrainian independence going forward and forever. And so where is that independent security guarantee going to come from once you've sorted out the territorial lines? Elizabeth, as the president, flies to Alaska to meet Vladimir Putin, what are you hearing about what that's kind of what the Europeans are concerned about. What does President Trump want to get out of this? Why is he having this meeting with Vladimir Putin?
He is so desperate for a Nobel Peace Prize. It's as simple as that, you think? There's more than that. I think he wants to show his toughness. I think he wants to perhaps show that he can stand up to Putin. We don't know. He did not do well in Helsinki in the first term. That was one of the great shocks of his first term when he said he agreed with Putin over his own intelligence agencies about Russian interference in the 2020 election, but 2016 election. But we shall see. Coming up, Molly John Fast joins us to explain her new essay for the New York Times on what she calls America's real-life Gilded Age finale. Morning Joe will be right back.
you.